The disciples huddled behind a locked door, their hearts pounding in the silence, every creak and whisper outside making them flinch. Fear and confusion thick in the air, pressing down on them like the darkness that filled the room. Their world had been shattered. Jesus, their hope, their teacher, the one they believed was the Messiah, was crucified and buried. The dreams they had built with him seemed to crumble in a single afternoon. The story should have ended there with grief and silence, but then came the whispers, soft, uncertain, but impossible to ignore. Mary Magdalene burst in, breathless and trembling, claiming she'd seen him alive. Her words were wild, but her eyes burned with conviction. Peter and John ran to the tomb, desperate for answers. They found it empty. The grave clothes folded neatly, as if someone had left in peace, not in haste. It was too wild to believe, too much for their weary minds to accept. So they hid, trying to make sense of the impossible, clinging to each other in the shadows. 10 men, faces marked by grief and sleepless nights, jumped at every sound, haunted by the fear that they might be next. They were fugitives now, hunted and afraid, their lives in danger simply for following the one who had been crucified. Yet in that darkness, a fragile hope flickered. Could it be true? Could Jesus really be alive as Mary claimed? They spoke in hushed tones, voices trembling, piecing together a puzzle that didn't fit, each story adding confusion and a sliver of hope. But one of them, Thomas, was missing from the circle, his absence a silent ache among the group. We don't know where he was, maybe lost in sorrow, wandering the empty streets, or maybe seeking solitude to wrestle with his pain. Whatever the reason, he missed the moment that changed everything, the moment when hope broke through despair. He missed Jesus appearing in that locked room, standing among them saying, "Peace be with you." The impossible had happened right before their eyes. He missed seeing the wounds in Jesus' hands and side, the proof that it was truly him, alive and victorious over death. When Thomas returned, he found not 10 grieving friends, but 10 men electrified with joy, their sorrow transformed into celebration. "We have seen the Lord!" they exclaimed, voices ringing with excitement and awe as if the world had been remade. Their faces shone with hope, but for Thomas, their joy was a wall he couldn't climb, a barrier between his pain and their newfound faith. He had seen the same cross, felt the same despair, and the wounds in his heart were still raw. How could they believe so easily, when everything he knew told him that death was final? Their testimony wasn't enough for him. Words alone could not heal his doubt or erase his grief. His grief was too deep, his reality too strong, and the memory of loss too fresh to let hope in. He needed more than words. He needed proof, something he could see and touch, something real enough to break through his sorrow. In that room, hope and doubt collided, swirling together in the candlelight, neither one able to fully silence the other. And Thomas stood alone, waiting for something real, longing for a sign that faith could be more than just a story whispered in the dark. Thomas listened, his eyes fixed on the faces of his friends as they spoke with excitement and hope. But their words, full of wonder and conviction, bounced off the walls he'd built around his heart, unable to break through the fortress of his pain. A man raised from the dead? The idea seemed impossible, almost absurd. It sounded like wishful thinking. He'd seen the blood, felt the finality of loss, and the weight of grief still pressed heavily on his soul. Their story felt like a desperate attempt to cope with heartbreak, a fragile hope clung to in the darkness. He couldn't share their joy. He hadn't shared their experience. The gap between their hope and his reality felt unbridgeable. So he set his terms, clear and unwavering. "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." It wasn't stubbornness, it was honesty. His pain was real, his doubt a shield forged by heartbreak and disappointment. He'd lost Jesus once. He couldn't risk hope again, not unless he was sure it wouldn't be shattered a second time. Thomas wanted more than a distant glimpse. He longed to touch the wounds, to feel the proof with his own hands, to know for himself that hope was not a lie. His demand was personal, not arrogant. He wasn't trying to challenge his friends, but to protect his own fragile heart. He needed certainty, something tangible he could hold on to, something that would anchor his faith in reality. His friends must have been disappointed, perhaps even hurt by his refusal to believe their testimony. But they didn't cast him out, they let him stay, they let him doubt. Their love made room for his questions, their friendship held space for his uncertainty. For a week, Thomas lived in tension, present but not convinced. He watched, he listened, he waited, wrestling with his thoughts in silence. He was the man who needed to see, the one who couldn't settle for second-hand faith, the one waiting in the shadows while others basked in resurrection light, longing for a sign that would finally unlock his heart. 8 days passed in that upper room. The 10 disciples, filled with quiet joy, waited for Jesus to appear again. The world outside was unchanged, but everything inside them was new. For Thomas, the week was agony. Surrounded by friends, he felt utterly alone. Every joyful story was a reminder of his own unbelief. He replayed their words, searching for cracks. Was he the only one seeing clearly, or the only one blind? Doubt is heavy, especially when you carry it alone. Part of him wanted to believe, but the memory of the cross held him back. This week of waiting mattered. It showed that faith isn't always instant. The others didn't kick him out, they waited with him. They trusted that Jesus would meet Thomas in his need. They gave him the gift of time and presence. Another week, another locked room. This time, Thomas was there. Suddenly, Jesus appeared among them. Locked doors, no obstacle for the risen Lord. His first words, "Peace be with you." No accusation, no disappointment, just peace. But this time, Jesus had come for Thomas. He knew Thomas's heart, his exact words, his need for proof. The Good Shepherd had come for his lost sheep. Jesus didn't wait for Thomas to speak. He didn't scold or shame. He moved toward him with love. The room fell silent as Jesus and Thomas faced each other. This was no performance, just grace meeting doubt. Jesus' arrival wasn't to overwhelm but to heal. He met Thomas exactly where he was. In the middle of doubt, pain, and stubbornness, Jesus brought peace. The Prince of Peace came for one troubled heart, and everything changed. Jesus looked at Thomas not with judgment but with deep understanding and compassion, seeing the honest struggle in his heart. He offered the proof Thomas demanded. "Put your finger here, see my hands." Jesus met Thomas exactly where he was, not shaming him for his questions but inviting him closer. The wounds were real, not illusions or tricks of the mind. They were the marks of suffering, pain, and sacrifice. "Reach out your hand and put it into my side." Jesus offered not just words but tangible evidence, inviting Thomas to experience the truth for himself. Jesus invited Thomas to touch the evidence of death and believe in life. It was an invitation to move from doubt to faith, from fear to hope. It was vulnerability beyond comprehension, a moment where the divine chose to be open and exposed for the sake of one doubter's heart. The risen Lord offered his scars to a doubter, showing that faith is not about having all the answers, but about trusting in the one who bears the wounds. In that moment, Jesus wasn't just proving himself, he was showing love, a love that reaches out even when we hesitate, a love that welcomes our questions. His love isn't afraid of our doubts, he draws near to us, even when we're uncertain, and offers us peace in the midst of confusion. He comes close, invites us near and shows that his power is made perfect in his wounds. The scars are not hidden, they are the very proof of his victory. The things meant to destroy him became symbols of victory, reminders that hope can rise from the darkest places. Then Jesus said, "Stop doubting and believe." These words were not a harsh command but a gentle invitation to trust. Not a harsh command, but a loving plea, spoken with patience and kindness, inviting Thomas to step into a new reality. Jesus had crossed the chasm of death and doubt, bridging the gap so that faith could be possible for all who struggle. Now, the choice was Thomas's. He stood at a crossroads, his heart pulled between skepticism and hope. Remain a prisoner of doubt, or step into faith. The invitation was clear, but the decision was deeply personal. The room and heaven waited for his response, holding its breath as Thomas faced the greatest invitation of his life. Did Thomas touch him? The Bible doesn't say. Maybe it didn't matter. Seeing was enough. The need for proof melted away in the presence of the risen Christ. All the doubt, pain, and resistance crumbled. Thomas saw not a ghost, but his Lord and his God. The truth hit him like a wave, bringing him to his knees. From the depths of his soul came the most profound confession, "My Lord and my God." Not a question, not a whisper, a declaration. The sound of a man who journeyed through doubt and found faith. He didn't just acknowledge Jesus was alive, he acknowledged who Jesus is. This was the climax. Thomas the doubter made the clearest statement about Jesus' divinity. He called him Lord, supreme authority. He called him God, divine nature. In that cry, Thomas expressed the heart of Christian faith. The man before him, wounds and all, was God himself. And Thomas believed. "My Lord and my God," Thomas's words are the bedrock of Christian faith. In that moment he spoke for every believer to come. Jesus is both Lord our Master and God our Savior. My Lord meant surrender. Thomas handed over control. My made it personal. And my God, a devout Jew, would never say this lightly. Thomas recognized the power over life and death belonged to God alone. This was not a distant deity, but a God who knows and loves us. For Christians, Thomas's confession is a model. Faith isn't just accepting facts, it's a relationship. It's surrendering to Jesus' lordship and worshiping him as God. When we doubt, we return to this truth. The one we follow is Lord of all. The one we trust is God, who still bears the scars of love, and that changes everything. After Thomas's confession, Jesus spoke one last time. Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. This blessing is for us, those who live centuries later. We can't see or touch Jesus, but we have the apostles' testimony, the scriptures, and the Spirit. We are called to believe without seeing. Jesus calls us blessed, not because our faith is better, but because it's different. Thomas's doubt and confession strengthen our faith. He doubted so we might believe more easily. He touched the wound so we could be healed by faith. Jesus knows believing without seeing is hard. It takes trust, a step into the unknown. But he promises a unique blessing for those who do. Our faith isn't a blind leap, it's a step into the light. Thomas's story is about the bridge between seeing and believing, and that bridge is open to all. The risen Christ changed Thomas forever. He entered as a doubter, left as a worshiper. History says Thomas became a courageous missionary, traveling farther than any other apostle. Jesus didn't just save him, he transformed him. The doubter became a devoted disciple, willing to die for his faith. Thomas's story gives hope to all who struggle with doubt. Doubt isn't the opposite of faith, it can lead to deeper belief. Jesus met Thomas in his questions, and he'll meet us in ours. Honest doubt, brought to Jesus, can blossom into unshakable faith. No one is too far gone, no doubt too deep for Christ's love. He comes to us even behind locked doors. He shows us his wounds, invites us to believe, and he turns doubters into disciples, fear into faith.